And just like that, Nebraska showed to UCLA, life in the Big Ten ain't going to be so easy. Welcome to Big Ten Life.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. We're reacting to, initially, the UCLA loss at Nebraska. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. All right, so where are we going with this one? Well, where we get started is the fact that UCLA lost this game 66-58 in Lincoln. The first time they played in Lincoln in 70 years, since the mid-1950s, and they lost in that game too. What did UCLA do wrong in this one? It was a game that was tied at half. They started up 7-0, didn't give up a bucket for the first 5 minutes of this game, then couldn't score for the next 10 or so minutes, it felt like, in the first half. Went on a 15-0 spurt of their own to go up 7 to 8 points. Nebraska went on a mini run to then end the half, I believe 9-0. And then next you know is 24-24 at the break. Second half was pretty much owned by Nebraska. They outscored the Bruins by 8, 42-34. Large portions of the second half, I think, felt eerily similar to what UCLA felt when playing in Phoenix against Arizona, although a true home crowd factor in this game as opposed to a neutral site home crowd like it was playing Arizona. And I think the big news was the pregame announcement that Eric Dailey Jr. was questionable, which mainly meant that he was out or not available. He did not play in this game. A regular starter for UCLA, Eric Dailey Jr., did not play in this game, and that was a huge factor to UCLA winning this game. We'll talk more about that in a moment. What did UCLA do to lose this game? They turned it over 15 times, and when UCLA's played bad, they have turned it over, and they have not done well shooting the basketball. Sometimes you can attribute that to free throw shooting. Today, 10 of 13 was not so bad. It was the 4 of 28 three-point shooting with 15 turnovers that led to 17 Nebraska points off turnovers. That's a category UCLA is almost always winning under Mick Cronin. They forced 13 turnovers, 5 less than their season average. Cronin had attributed, teams are going to play well, have high intensity, high energy, like a practical sold-out crowd in Lincoln was, full of Nebraska fans. They're probably not going to play as bad at home as they might play, and hopefully what we expect to be Tuesday against Michigan, a rockin' Pauley Pavilion. Nebraska is a fringe top 25 team, like a good team. They're pretty good. They're now 12-2. UCLA, unfortunately, in this new Big Ten life, you're not going to get a second chance at Nebraska in the regular season. So you just kind of sit there, you're like, I want to go boo some Cornhuskers. No, that's not how it's going to roll if they come to Westwood. That won't happen in this season. The next thing UCLA can maybe face them is either a Big Ten tournament or an NCAA tournament. But Nebraska's good. And as I pointed out prior to this game, Nebraska had shades of what UCLA struggled with earlier this year. It was the makeup of a New Mexico team with the roster construction. Big guards, big players, multiple big players that can be utilized more than UCLA's use of a Diamara. Although the second part of his entry into this game, the last few minutes, he looked really good. It's just, can UCLA get some consistency out of the big man and get that when he's in the game earlier, get 15 to 20 minutes that are productive out of a Diamara. All right. But again, UCLA, when you're shooting 14% from three, that's not going to cut it. Again, repeatedly watching the broadcast, it's a defense against Nebraska that when you're open, you have to hit threes. And there is a lid on the basket for the Bruins. It seemed like a couple of times shots were halfway down, they popped out, and then the Bruins were just short. Nothing would go in for a UCLA offense, which we're somewhat used to at times becoming stagnant. And instead of these neutral site games, you're going to be facing crowds like Nebraska just about every time UCLA steps on the floor on the road, whether it's going to USC at the end of January or going across the country to the East Coast to face off against a Rutgers team that's also in need of a quad one win, a Maryland team that wants something similar coming up, or a Michigan team that's having a West Coast swing against USC and UCLA. They'd love to say, hey, welcome to the Midwest of sorts. You're going to lose. UCLA, as expected, lost the rebounding battle. That's what happens. But again, it's the size that disrupts the shot, the inability to hold on to the basketball, and leading to Nebraska, which is a pretty good defensive team, to play a little bit better in key categories that UCLA normally dominates. Now, what has been a key factor in UCLA's lack of success in their 3 losses and their near loss to Arizona, right? As much as that Gonzaga game was close, UCLA, it was a back and forth game. That was pretty much back and forth. It was the Arizona game where they escaped with the win, I think, more than they did against the Zags. So you look at some similarities against the New Mexico game. They turned it over a lot. New Mexico was in control for close to 40 minutes. The Bruins made a little run late, never truly challenged the Lobos. This game, back and forth for the first half. The Bruins had a chance to get and tie the game on a fast break at 36. Poor pass doesn't lead to UCLA getting that bucket. And then Nebraska pulls away and goes up by 13 with just about 8 minutes left. And the UCLA Bruins didn't have enough to make something happen. Now, there was 6 minutes left in a flagrant foul committed by Nebraska when the Bruins could have had 2 free throws, which would have cut it to 7, and a bucket, could have made it a 5-point game. UCLA in that possession scored 1 point, and that's pretty much when this game was over. They had chances. It was 4 points with the 30 seconds to go, but a true chance at winning this game would have involved UCLA scoring 4 to 5 points when Nebraska committed a flagrant one, a terrible flagrant one, on a fast break with UCLA still in their own backcourt, and Sebastian Mack didn't even have the basketball. So again, we look at the lack of success UCLA's had in this season. It all comes down sometimes. Bilodeau's the big scorer. Mack can make buckets. I can point to Stefanovic, Dylan Andrews, Eric Dailey Jr. This team tends to go how well or poorly Eric Dailey Jr. has done. Against New Mexico, he played 15 minutes, went 1 of 2 from 3. He had 4 personal fouls, 2 turnovers, and 5 points, well off his season average of 11 points per game. All right, that was a bad game by many UCLA standards, and that was a poor one for Eric Dailey Jr. Now, the Bruins didn't struggle until they faced Arizona. What did Eric Dailey Jr. in that game? He had 22 minutes, 1 of 3 shooting. He had 4 personal fouls and only 3 points against Arizona. The Bruins had a late run to win that game. When it looked like what they did against Nebraska, UCLA went on a late run and took the lead to win the game. Okay. Then we look at North Carolina. Well, that's the game where he got popped in the face, had 9 minutes played, had 2 points, was pretty much a non-factor, actually had 3 personal fouls, but there was that same facial injury that did not allow him to play. So against North Carolina, when he was unavailable and hurt, UCLA lost. Now, they blew that game, but who could have had some big buckets down the stretch? Certainly Dailey Jr. Against Arizona, when they almost lost, he didn't play as well. And then against New Mexico, that's when something happened there. Against Gonzaga, 5 of 10 shooting, 4 of 5 from 3, 18 points. You look against Oregon, instead of 8 from 3, 19 points. Huge. Okay? Those are some big-time teams where he's come up with some big-time buckets where UCLA's been able to win and get those significant wins away from home, away from their home court, when Dailey Jr. has been available and ready to play. All 3 losses and a near loss against Arizona, but it's a win and a quality win at this moment, even though Arizona is currently projected out of the NCAA tournament, have been when Dailey Jr. has been ineffective, or in most cases, ineffective due to injury, as the last 2 games have involved him either out against Nebraska or ineffective against North Carolina because he was out, which required him to wear the mask, and then unavailable. Remember, William Kyle III was not available to play. He had the medical issue, had the surgery, maybe is expected back against Michigan, and that's a team with a lot of size that could hurt UCLA's interior game because they couldn't drive. Mack wasn't getting a lot of buckets. It was just a struggle for UCLA to score in this game, which in most games might be the case with these Big Ten defenses. UCLA in this game had 15 points with Tyler Bilodeau, 6 of 9 shooting, 5 rebounds, but it didn't feel like one of his better 15-point games. There's times where Bilodeau's getting buckets. It didn't feel like it was an impactful 15. UCLA couldn't score, but it wasn't like, oh, he took over the game. Stefanovic, a quiet 10, which is good off the bench, but 3 of 9 shooting. You wish he could do a little more, although probably forced to shoot when UCLA was so cold. Didn't seem like he played 30 minutes, did Stefanovic, but he did and got 10 points. No other player in this team for UCLA had more than 9 points. He had Sky Clark, Sebastian Mack, Kobe Johnson, all with about 9 or 8 points. Dylan Andrews with one late bucket. And then you see Trent Perry, limited points in 10 minutes, 0. Dominic Harris, this is a game where I would have liked to see Dominic Harris fire up as many shots as it takes for him to get red hot. Because if UCLA is going to steal some of these games in the road where they're down 10, 5 minutes to go, and they hit a couple of buckets, it's when somebody like Dominic Harris with the three-point shooting prowess that he possesses coming to Westwood, if he makes some of those threes, that's how UCLA is going to steal some of these games in the road. Now, Stefanovic can fill that role. You can point to maybe Mack making those. Bilodeau, Sky Clark in 31 minutes was truly, truly banged up and ineffective. Even though he was 9 points on 50% shooting, 2 hard screens just left his left arm, left shoulder seeming like limp. The left side of his body just didn't seem to be the same with Sky Clark. All right. When he got run over by Bereke and then got run over another screen late, which they called a foul on him. Clark just wasn't the same, and he didn't make a single three, which UCLA would have loved him to make. Was not the same guy as that true ball handler that could dominate. He didn't turn it over a lot. No, the turnover numbers went to Dylan Andrews and Sebastian Mack. Those two combined for half of the UCLA turnovers. Two of the guys that were leading the charge last year, and you can see, all right, Mick Cronin goes to the portal, and you get Sky Clark involved and doesn't turn it over as much, all right? Well, today that was a bit of a problem. Dylan Andrews played only 19 minutes, so we're starting to see that reduction of role for Andrews. But with Eric Dailey Jr. out, he had to play those 20 minutes and be in the starting lineup with the 4-guard lineup in Bilodeau. Interesting look, I thought, but now we're starting to see Cronin, I think, pull away from Andrews until his play improves. Now, between a Perry, a Dom Harris, and an Andrews, somebody has got to pick it up between the three-point shooting of Dom Harris, Trent Perry, and his effectiveness on the floor as a true point guard to give Sky Clark rest or be a scorer, one of the two. And then Dylan Andrews has to be effective and just can't be having 3 personal fouls, 4 turnovers to get 2 points and an assist. All right, he's what I think they said he was close to 1 of 15, 1 of 16, maybe 2 of 16 in his last 3 games, Dylan Andrews. That is a number that is going to hurt. And I thought he's a guy that would be helpful, would be useful for UCLA to win a game like this, be another athletic option. It's just not translating into third-year success for the UCLA guard, who I thought had a great sophomore campaign. Mack was doing his best at times, seemingly too much. 6 assists, but 4 turnovers. Played 28 minutes, 3 of 11 from the floor. He wasn't as effective as getting to the rim, but Nebraska's big. They're big in the backcourt. They're big in the front court. They can trot 3 different guys out there, even with foul trouble, all of which could make plays, hit a free throw, have impactful screens that knock out your starting point guard. Everything was going Nebraska's way. You see Bryce Williams had 16 points because he was 11 of 12 from the line. I know a lot of fans might point out UCLA made 5 more field goals than Nebraska. They made a higher percentage of shots than Nebraska. But in the end, in a low-scoring game, the Huskers had a couple more threes made at a slightly better percentage, even though neither team shot well. And in a game where UCLA went 10 of 13 from the line, Nebraska 25 of 29 from the line and played slightly better defense and had +9 second chance points. All right, that is where Nebraska, with the size, the rebounding advantage, won this game. A little more turnovers and turning those into points. Sometimes where UCLA forced to steal, Nebraska ripped it back, and then they turned that into once, twice, maybe a third chance at a bucket. In the game where they lost by 8, UCLA did, even those are last-minute free throws. That's a big margin when it comes to the bench points UCLA didn't have. They were -8. And then you look at the additional points where I'm looking at here. The free throws were huge as well in the second chance points. Frustrating, but welcome to Big Ten life. This is how it's going to be. Until the Bruins get healthy, they find a new role for Dylan Andrews that is more successful, because we got our first true look at Sebastian Mack in a starting role. Maybe not a successful version of it, because you had no Eric Dailey Jr. We see how much certain guys mean to UCLA, like Eric Dailey, and who might need that reduction of role in the future, which might be coming soon if injury allows. And now the Bruins come back home, and you wonder how quickly they can recover for a Tuesday night showdown against the Michigan Wolverines. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. But you're running out of time to check out this deal. New customers, you can finish the season off with a $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. You're running out of time to check it out. FanDuel, they've got so many ways for you to pick up a W, whether it's betting on which players are going to score touchdowns and how many points each team will score. All super thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so now I'm going to wrap up this pod talking about the UCLA women who were in a battle in Bloomington, where the men will be on Valentine's Day nights. UCLA, a sellout. Maybe you watched that doubleheader between the women and the men back to back, all right? We saw the women not play as well. The #1 ranked team in the country, unbeaten, and it was 4 hours straight of scintillating action of basketball. Some good, some bad, a lot of weird officiating in the women's game. UCLA, they were struggling in this game. But because they're so good, they could still keep this game at an arm's distance after the first quarter, where they led 18-16 against the Hoosiers. But then Indiana in the second quarter, which was the difference in this game, the Bruins outscored them 15-5. I'm like, did Indiana make a bucket in this second quarter? I think they made one, maybe two. The Bruins pulled away with a 15-5 spurt. And then Indiana, the second 20 minutes, outscored the Bruins by one. It just helped that UCLA had already taken in a 12-point halftime lead. Who are key contributors? Well, Kiki Rice with an off night, 12 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. So nearly on triple-double watch on a bad night for a UCLA starting point guard. Limited her turnovers, 36 minutes. One day she can go perfect from the field and score 20 points. Other days she's grabbing boards, hitting an open three, 7 assists. And doing that with limiting her turnovers despite a high usage rate for one of the UCLA stars, that's good for her. Baby Jaquez, you got Gabs coming in there with 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and then 11 points. Decent, efficient shooting, not the best actually, 4 of 9, 28 minutes. She is just one of those depth pieces UCLA throws out there. All right, you've got Dugalich, 6 points, 18 minutes, was in foul trouble in this game, but hit a clutch jumper or two to keep the Bruins up 8 like the Bruins kept to do. Indiana was fighting in, trying to get to 8, get to 7. The Bruins would not allow it, all right? And, of course, the star of the game, as always, Lauren Betts, 12 of 16 shooting, 25 and 12 in 34 minutes played. What were other ways she affected the game? So many misses. Lauren Betts had 2 blocks and a steal. And you look at the points in the paint comparison for Indiana. UCLA, 40 points in the paint. So more than half their points. Indiana's 28 of 62, meaning more than half their points came away from the paint. And the amount of times they missed an easy layup, they missed a shot in close just because Betts was around the area, that's a similar thing other teams are going to feel. So we've noticed the UCLA talent travels. We got Londra Jones, couple of shots, 1-3. Not a lot of momentum there with her shooting. We saw Gardner in the starting lineup, so the Bruins continuing to move things around between Arna-Salo and Gardner. None of those players truly had a good day between Gardner, Barker, Jones, and Arna-Salo in terms of scoring and dominating in that fashion. But the Bruins are just so deep that they can give some of these players a bit of rest, like a bet, 6 minutes, but you time it at the end of the third, you do it in the beginning of the fourth. That gives you a 5 to 7 minute extended rest like Corey Close is trying to give her starting center. The Bruins, even on a poor day shooting the 3, what both Corey Close and Mick Cronin are trying to emphasize to their teams, Big Ten life is not going to be easy. Indiana, the women's side, the broadcast was saying, hey, they're a top 5 team in attendance. They brought a sellout crowd to see a morning tip, basically, against the UCLA Bruins, #1 team in the country. And then the Bruins defense forced an Indiana team that likes to shoot the three, play quick, play up tempo this year. 4 of 21 from the floor. The Bruins limited their turnovers, 13 compared to Indiana's 13, but made them pay by scoring 8 more points off those turnovers and dominating the rebounding. 40-31, plus 9 there. And UCLA, they like to share the basketball. 19 assists on 28 made shots compared to Indiana's 8 on 22. So a lot more isolation play from the Hoosiers because they couldn't find the open player, or by the time the pass was made, they had to hold the basketball for a few more seconds looking to take the open three, which there was none. A game where UCLA led for 38 minutes against Indiana. 38 minutes. They led pretty much the whole way. There was never a single lead change. It was tied. India did their best with a home crowd to run for it. A 9-0 spurt to try and get back in this game. They did their best, but UCLA is just too much. They're too good, and Lauren Betts is just an absolute star. Kiki Rice can affect the game in many ways. And I'm just wondering who between a Gardner, a Jones, and a Dugalich is going to have the next big game for UCLA. Because to beat these Big Ten teams consistently, they're also going to go on their tough their East Coast swings. They're going to have the game in New Jersey for a Monday night in between, I believe, a Maryland and a Rutgers game. Both tough competition for the Bruins coming up in the next few weeks at the end of January. Those players are going to have step-up games. Today, Betts was enough. Kiki Rice and Hawkins were your 3 Bruins in double figures. You're going to need the depth of the three-point shooting to go beat a USC. Not once, but twice, and maybe even a third time later this year in a Big Ten tournament or an NCAA tournament. To go beat these other teams that are really talented, they're going to have rocking atmospheres. We're going to have to see the three-point shooting pick up. Lauren Betts is always a walking bucket in the paint if the Bruins can get her the ball, and sometimes they do struggle to get her the ball in the paint, where I think she could be easily averaging 30 against most teams in the country. But the Bruins are deeper. They're better than that. And what I continue to think their best transfer option still out for the year, waiting for next year, and Charlize Ledger-Walker. They have got a team of 8 to 9 players that are fairly capable of getting buckets, close to double figures on other rosters, but together in this team, they have made themselves a super team that at this moment is undefeated heading into the next Big Ten game. So a big 73-62 win from Indiana at Indiana, wire to wire, including a close first quarter, and the Bruins fighting off a sold-out crowd and a scrappy Hoosier squad in a good win. All right, so lots of UCLA action today, and that's why you should get your hands up, Bruins fans, for an 8 clap. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been the super Locked On UCLA reaction edition for both the men and the women today, and back-to-back nationally televised games on a Saturday morning into afternoon. Bad news for the men, but the number one women continue to roll on with victories. All right, stay tuned for more Locked On UCLA content, more football transfer portal edition. Who are they going after? How can Joey Aguilar work in the new offense under the new offensive coordinator? We're all going to examine that on this pod. So like, comment, subscribe, share, download. Thanks for your support. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.